So now that brings us to our fourth match of the day, which is Casie taking on Jarla in this one. And once again, pretty critical records for these two that are here. Casie sits at 5-5, and Jarla sitting at 4-6. Had a bad time in Las Vegas in terms of the event and his record there. So when we look at the standings, you can see how important it is to get these middle ground wins right now. With Orange all the way through Swids, all these records are still up for grabs right now if they can pick up win streaks in these last couple matches.
Yeah, and it's something I wanted to add before we got off Hunter Ace as well, where Hunter Ace picking up that victory is bad news to basically everyone else that we're seeing play today, because he's starting to stretch away in that second place spot. You know, we saw Orange play RDU just right before him. They really wanted to see a Pavel win there to just tighten up the group even further. Hunter Ace win is not what the pursuing pack, which now includes Casie and Jarla, who we are moving on to, they really want to see Hunter Ace picking up losses here, where, you know, Psycho is gone. You know, they can kind of forget about him, but Hunter Ace is kind of the player who's furthest up the league that they actually still consider relevant, so they're looking for him to lose games, whereas Hunter Ace picking up a win there is of huge detriment to both of these players that we're about to see. Yeah, and we can take a look at the deck list and see what we have in store as well. Casie has brought the H1O Rogue. As I personally... I can't believe that made it through. How did we get here?
Well, it makes perfect sense. So it was Water Rogue, or Ocean Rogue, as some people want to call it. I won't get to the importance and details of that. Spirit of the Shark and Sea Giant. It's oceanic themed. It's Water Rogue. When you take out one of those particles, you have one left, one hydrogen, H1O.
Yes.
It's Water Rogue.
Yes, it is. And Casie has been very much on the Pogo train recently, so a little interesting to see him divert away from that and go back to the more conventional rogue list. But it's pretty much standard, I would say, as to what we've evolved into at this point in terms of the secondary and tertiary makeup. Jarla, on the other hand, is rolling with the Cyclone Mage, and he is a Luna's Pocket Galaxy gamer, something that we do have to keep talking about, based on really Boston drawing a line in the sand earlier and saying that it's a bad card. So it's something that we will have to keep on top of in terms of who's playing it and who isn't. And then you look at the remaining decks, that is an anti-warrior build on one side and then the anti-aggro build on the other side. Jarla choosing to go with one Rabble Bouncer in his anti-aggro, whereas we have seen both 2 and none be used as options as well in those spots.
Yep, I'm pretty excited about this one. You know, you mentioned that Casie had been on the Pogo train. If you take a look at his Twitter, you can see that. You go look at his tweets and replies, and there's a lot of boing with a rabbit emoji and then a knife emoji next to it.
The knife is essential.
Yeah, it really is. Like, I've watched him play a bit of Pogo Rogue now, and he is just super aggressive with it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, I look down at the board, I'm like, he doesn't have any cards in hand. It's like turn 4.
No, never. If he has cards in his hand, he's been doing something wrong. I actually have enjoyed Pogo Rogue recently as well. I'm currently of the belief that Heist Baron Togwaggle is actually core to Pogo Rogue. That's not something that a lot of people seem to agree with me on just yet, but I'm willing to draw my line in the stand.
Why is that?
Because it gives you something to do in situations where you have to commit all of your Pogos, right? Sometimes you're sat with a Pogo that might be a 5/5 or whatever that you really want to play, but you can't because you have no shuffle tools in your hand, so that you can't keep going. Having Togwaggle in your deck gives you freedom that you can exhaust all your Pogos, just play a 5/5 because it's good, and then later, if you need to, you can shuffle a bunch of Togwaggles and keep going.
Makes sense to me.
Also, sometimes you just take Goblet and it fills your hand with Pogo. That actually happens more than you might think.
It's definitely an actual setup.
Yes.
I have taken the Goblet a number of times in desperate situations, and it has only worked one time, though admittedly, haven't gotten in Pogo. But we're underway in this one. Casie leads off with Miscreant, and so Jarla's looking for big turns. I feel like early on, with the way that Jarla's hand is structured, this is going to be either very hit or very miss. And right now, with that Vendetta in hand and that Sea Giant in hand, it's feeling like this could be a miss.
Yeah, one thing to keep an eye on immediately here, Casie, as has been well documented, is perhaps the fastest player in Hearthstone. He plays instinctively, he plays through muscle memory, he plays through cumulative knowledge of thousands of games and trusts that that knowledge allows him to react to situations quickly and correctly. He feels if he slows down, he potentially overthinks and he can talk himself out of the right play more often than he will talk himself into the right play. Jarla, the exact polar opposite. He will rope a turn where he has 1 mana and 0 cards in hand, if that is even possible to do. He will absolutely do it. So you do have to keep an eye on just kind of the rhythm of the game, where Casie just kind of has to find something to do while Jarla is taking his turns so that he does not end up getting frustrated. Although I have spoken to Casie at length about this, and weirdly, he says when he practices with, say, Bunny Hopper, for example, in his practice group, he is actually usually the one roping. Like, he plays faster than Bunny Hopper, who is another notorious roper. But in their practice group, the roles are reversed, and Bunny Hopper actually plays quicker than he does in practice, which is kind of bizarre to think about.
Meanwhile, an example of exactly what you mean.
Yeah. You see how long-winded I had to be in that explanation to fill Jarla's turn? Now imagine me trying to explain that during Casey's turn.
Yeah, and imagine me having to just say things long-winded at all. It gets very confusing and elaborate and nonsensical, which is why I'm glad I took Casey's turn on that one. But now I'm on Jarla's turn to really talk about that a little bit more. So when you think about it in totality, Sottle sounds really smart and well thought out because he thinks about these things ahead of time. He plans them out, and he wants to look for opportunities to really get them in there. When you put me in a situation like that, I just have to figure out something to say when I'm in that kind of situation. You're looking at Jarla's hand right here, and yeah, he's a little bit behind. Yeah, he's got a Mountain Giant. It's probably just Mountain Giant and then try to roll into a bunch of big freezes and try to end the game. But he's got to think about a lot of different things from Casey's side. It can't be instinctive from him because he has to anticipate a range. That range includes random cards from classes that Casie isn't playing. It's including Vendettas that are going to be packed in there. It's including a bunch of lackeys, which can be combined with Spirit of the Shark. The whole point I'm getting at is that Jarla's turns are typically more complicated than Casey's because he's not the aggressor in the matchup. He has to look for the opportunity to become the aggressor in the matchup, which is a very difficult thing to do because his deck is inherently not very aggressive. It's more like a combo deck. So when you think about those combos, you're thinking about Mountain Giant, you're thinking about Conjurer's Calling, you have to figure out what to draw. It's pretty easy to get the Mountain Giant down, but you have to think about the rest of the game.
Have you ever been happier to see a rope before in your life? Well done, by the way. Round of applause for Admirable in chat. That's very nice.
That was lovely.
Yeah.
That felt good.
I really wanted to pay that off with just, like, Ziliax, your turn on the other side, but, like, looking at Casey's hand, this is actually a pretty complicated turn, so the bit wasn't going to work.
Still blistering fast.
It was real quick, yeah. Spirit of the Shark, Vendetta, deal 4, your turn.
If Casie had just roped out that turn, that just would have been the perfect, because I was ready to go again.
I don't believe you.
What do you do now, though? I mean, your Mountain Giant got checked. You anticipated this was going to happen because there's a 4/3 on the other side.
Yes.
But it got checked from hand.
Yes. Which puts you in a significantly worse position than you were before. And honestly, this is where the Luna's Pocket Galaxy debate really comes in for me, because sometimes Cyclone Mage does find itself in these positions where, through conventional means, the game really does start to look somewhat unwinnable because there's just too much pressure piling up against you. You don't have the tools that you need. The reason why Cyclone Mage is such a good deck, and the reason why a lot of really good players do enjoy Cyclone Mage and feel like they can dig their way out of just about any situation with it, is that they have a lot of opportunity to just scam people out of the game. They have cards that are just scammy. They just do unfair things. And Luna's Pocket Galaxy is just another card that you can pile on top of that can just solve a game out of nowhere on its own.
Scam Mage.
That's what it is.
Not much scamming right now, though. I mean, this is the Casie show right now, I feel.
Yes.
So the one opportunity that Jarla really has, I think, is if Casie is looking towards like a Sea Giant turn, he gets his own Sea Giant down, Jarla answers back, and is able to freeze out the board. That, to me, is the one direction that Jarla could have taken this game.
Yeah. I think if Casie does progress to a Sea Giant position, he needs to constantly keep Sea Giant Frost Nova in mind, right? Like, you can create board... Okay.
What?
If you just had to summon a bunch of green minions, then fine. You can engineer a board state where you can play Sea Giant, but your opponent cannot respond with Sea Giant Frost Nova, right? Like, that's a sweet spot that you can hit.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Is exactly what he's doing.
This is super smart.
That's perfect. I love it when I'm playing together.
Casie played that turn a little bit slower as well. He knew something was up, and his head was telling him something else.
And he worked it out.
He took a little bit of time to think about it and said, you know what? I don't need these extra minions. In fact, I need less in play in case Frost Nova happens.
Yeah, He needed those extra minions like he needed a hole in the head.
And this also shuts off opposing Sea Giant Frost Nova on turn 7.
Isn't that exactly what we were just talking about?
Well, I was just talking about him having less minions in play so he could play minions and make an impact.
That is specifically what I spent the whole of last turn talking about. That he has to find a space where he can play Sea Giant, but the opponent can't respond with Sea Giant Frost Nova.
Okay, I was just
very specifically.
I just kept hearing the Sea Giant Frost Nova as like the impending. Just to me, it didn't occur the fact that it was 7 mana going to 8 mana. That effect didn't occur to my head until I saw it.
Okay.
I am notoriously bad at Sea Giant stuff. Like, I've had people watch me play, and like we figure out a Sea Giant turn, and then I walk through it. I've convinced them that the Sea Giant happens, and then I walk through the turn, I'm like, I'm 1 mana off, and now neither Sea Giant comes down. Because instead I have to freeze this thing or I die. Just always got to see it.
Someday I'll be just like you.
And so because of that, Jarla now looks at the amount of damage and goes, I have to respond with a Frost Nova anyway. Needs to kill the Spirit of the Shark in his head. Don't disagree.
I did not see this coming, but actually, now that I see it resolved, it makes a lot of sense. Any other minions Jarla plays, Casie will likely take that opportunity to trade off his own minions and therefore make Jarla's Sea Giant worse. So Casie here just has to respond by either saying, okay, I play nothing, in which case I add very little pressure and I don't really efficiently deal with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, or I have to add more minions to this existing board state, and if he adds even a single minion to this board state, then Sea Giant Frost Nova does become an option. But Jarla seems to have something very different in mind, having drawn Elemental Evocation on the right-hand side of his hand.
It's a pop-off
now be leaning towards this Stargazer, yep.
I'm thinking Mirror Image, I'm thinking Cyclone, I'm thinking...
It's time to scam your opponent out of the game.
The future is ours.
Star Scammer Luna.
Behold the tool
Well, there's the mirror
of
image.
creation.
I just feel like I've done this too many times.
Yeah, yesterday we were testing the Tice matchups, right? Like Nomi Priest versus Mage. And I just kept sitting there saying, dude, Stargazer Luna is just better than my whole deck.
I mean, Stargazer Luna by itself is, is a singular 3-mana 2/4.
Excellent. Yes, we've come full circle.
Behold the tools of creation.
And you're hoping that works.
See what I mean? How else can you describe that turn but scammy?
Awesome.
I mean, I totally agree. I love this deck.
Yeah, that turn was awesome.
I love scamming my opponent.
Simon Scammer Welsh.
What? You mean scammer Simon Welsh?
You just introduced... you just introduced scam as an archetype in my head now, and everything is becoming into this scam archetype to me regardless of what category it fits in. People, decks, food.
Darn it, I gave Admirable new toys. Why did I do this?
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Casie has just suddenly found himself in trouble, though. Like, how did this happen?
Just trouble, though. He's not in Trub yet.
I don't think it's Trub yet.
Okay.
Because he's able to... Does he Shooting Star? Yeah, there we go.
Too soon.
I was trying to think if he hit the Khadgar, if he hit the Sea Giant. Was what I was thinking.
What? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he has the liberty of attempting to play around like a Conjurer's Calling turn. I think you shut down the draw and hope that this works.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to whether, if he trades differently and then kind of sacks his 1/1 into the Sea Giant or into the Khadgar, like whether he then has better opportunities with the board space to use like the doubled up Goblin Lackey or something like that.
You mean like on the following turn? Okay.
What to do?
I think Casey's read on the situation right now is Jarla's out of stuff. He just drew a bunch of cards. He didn't play anything from the left side. Now's the time to strike. His hand's weak. So for Jarla, that turn literally was about drawing Conjurer's Calling, I think.
I wonder.
It's a big call, just to leave up a Khadgar.
I think it's right on both sides. Like, Jarla had to make the bold call of just trying to draw through the deck and find a Conjurer's Calling for exactly this situation. Really smart. I would have played this game differently. I would have died and not really thought much else of it. For Casie, I think it's the same bold call. You know what? I need to pressure my opponent which means I have to take more risks with stuff in play. So this plays to a Frostbolt out, is that right? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, that just represents lethal next turn, actually.
Correct, yes.
So he doesn't, so he's just hoping that Casie doesn't have a way to respond to that. Another really smart situation. But
yep.
Again, with no Frost Nova left in the deck, now he's down to the last bidder out. So he needs like a second Mana Cyclone and something crazy to happen.
Yeah, and it was calculated really well as well, because Jarla was leaning towards the second banana for a significant amount of time that turn. Well, I mean, Jarla does everything for a significant amount of time, but you know what I mean. But he very quickly diverted off that because he realized he had lethal set up without it, and holding on to the banana then gave him better Antonidas follow-ups if he needed to. The real like misery for Jarla there is that he was so forced into Frost Nova that turn, but because obviously Antonidas Frost Nova is like a game-winning play in so many matchups these days, but just did not have the luxury. He had to freeze that turn. There's just too much pressure being forced down.
Arcane Intellect.
That's the good card.
Whoa. Oh.
Yeah, this makes sense.
Bootleg Frost Nova.
Yeah. There's only one really relevant thing that he's scared of on this board. Ray of Frost just makes a ton of sense. And this way he gets to push 8, potentially, if he wants to. Can he afford to do that if he raised the other 3/3 as well?
Yeah,
push
absolutely
8, self-guaranteed lethal.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's really clean. Really clean.
Are you kidding me?
You just find a way to scam your opponent out of the game.
Whoa!
I'm telling you, this is how you play Mage.
Casie has to get something off the Henge Clan burglar. He loses?
Yep.
How did it boil down to that? By the way, he's also got to kill an Antonidas, and he's got to kill a Sea Giant.
2, 4, 5, 6, 10 damage with the Kobold Lackey down face. Yeah, he'd need miracles to find lethal.
Holy Light and timeout!
What? Excuse me? Have you ever seen a situation before where your opponent has a 5/7 and an 8/6 and Shadow Word Death is significantly your worst choice?
No, I have not. Does that mean Casie is going to consider pushing face here?
Yep.
A Leroy shows up!
Of course, Casie just gets to threaten lethal himself now.
What is happening?
He knows his opponent's hand is exactly 1 banana and 3
What?
fireballs.
It's just scam, bro!
There is
Now Casey's just scamming the scam mage out of the scam!
There's no efficient way for Jarla to deal with these minions. Casie knows the exact contents of Jarla's hand. 1 banana, 3 fireballs, and a drawn card.
So you got to scam him back with Mana Cyclone. That's how you get out of this. This is real life.
Okay, but banana fireball cyclone or just banana cyclone?
I'm going for the Nova. 2 chances at Nova to me
so
is...
banana fireball
Well,
cyclone.
I don't know. Hang on. So 1 chance at
One,
Blizzard
Blizzard
Nova
as
Cone.
well. Yeah, right.
Oh, no, I think it's better for 1. I really do.
It's
so
interesting, right?
Do you need to fireball a minion?
But there, you can also... No, you can't. I was thinking of Power of Creation into like double Stegatron, double Safeguard as well, but that's just not possible.
It also gives you Flame Strike.
What to do?
Oh my gosh, it's 1. That's so weird.
I think it is 1. Like immediately when you said that, I thought, wow, is this a 1 spell? That's kind of nuts, right? Because Ray of Frost comes out the other way? Is that enough to matter?
That's an excellent question.
Oh, it's hard. Random Generation is just hard, dude. Like, I don't...
Oh!
It was the second card.
It was the
Freak out.
second card.
Don't freak out. It was the second card.
1, 2, 3, so 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, Jarla's dead. I cannot believe that Jarla had a chance in that game, and now I cannot believe that Casie is capitalizing on his chance in the game. That's unreal.
Is he dead?
Yeah, it's double battle cries.
Oh, double Rushman as well. Yeah.
And double bang.
That's 3, 5, 6, 10, 16, yeah. Higuchi.
Wow. What an unreal result this game ended up in. This is not what I would have expected, and I don't think if I made up the game progress, I would have been able to land on this.
That game was absolutely insane from both sides. Like, they did both go into very specific scenarios where they had to fish for weird outs in massively unfavored situations, and they just kept hitting them back to back to back to back.
Timeout. Timeout.
Yeah. I like how we both registered it in the same way. I think we both saw Holy Light first and went, oh, Holy Light, is Holy Light enough? And then the card to the left of it is just timeout, which just solves everything.
This is the one time that Rocky has ever taught me wrong, that you don't just always hit the one in the middle. It's like a famous quote from that movie. Rocky's dazed. He goes, I'm seeing 3 of them. He goes, hit the one in the middle. Yeah, I mean, that's where my eyes always first go, is hit the one in the middle. So the Holy Light's where I'm like, is the middle one the right one? And I just saw Holy Light. I'm like, whoa! And then the timeout is like mega brain, where you get to just punch your opponent in the face. You're like, forget these big minions. Take 4.
And you can tell how complicated that game state got through multiple routes. You know, the fact that we spent a whole turn debating whether it was 1 or 2 spells into Cyclone and still weren't sure by the end of it, and Jarla disagreed with our conclusion. But then also the fact that Casie basically played his turns as slowly as Jarla did towards the end of that game, because there was so much to consider. The turn where he picked the timeout, obviously the timeout is the nut outcome in that position, but everything else he had to do around that timeout to set himself up for the lethal opportunity, the exact lethal opportunity on the following turn, that's where the real like science came into it, and he played it out perfectly.
Yep, and that means we got to take a timeout right now. We got to go to a break. When we come back, we're getting into game number 2 of Jarla versus Casie. Casie up 1-0 on our 4th match of the day here in week number 6 of Hearthstone European Grandmasters.
My name is Kevin Casie Eberlein. A Grandmaster means to me that the last year of 2018 was a success. After having so much tournament success and getting to Grandmasters by most of the time just gaining points, gathering points and just performing well in tournaments means that I did something right. My goal was to get to the highest level of competition, and Grandmaster is the highest level of competition, and I achieved it, so I'm super happy. What I'm really good is at playing off muscle memory. So at the start of any meta game, the first week, I figure out the best decks, but I play them pretty poorly. So I just keep playing them till I actually know everything. And this is just, preparation is key. I don't only like Hearthstone, I love it, it's my passion. My life, like, it changed a lot since I started playing Hearthstone. I used to be really, really shy.
Really?
Yes. And then, like, after Thais, Crane talked to me, I just got a confidence boost. And from there, I changed quite a lot. Try to be the best what I can get out of myself, and then I'm gonna be happy.
My real name is Jaromír Vyskočil, my in-game name is Jarla, and I'm playing for Team Nordawind. When I got the email about that I'm in Grandmasters, I was really happy because I have been in competitive Hearthstone for 2 years and few months, and this is something special, competing against the best players in Europe. I like control decks, and I always play really slow. Some people can hate that I really often end up roping the turn. Sometimes I also overthink stuff, so it sometimes could affect my decision in the end, but yeah, I'm mostly slow and control player. My hobbies outside of Hearthstone, I enjoy running, I enjoy playing football or ice hockey with friends. My goal for Grandmasters is probably avoid relegation. but I would like to win as well.
Casie up a game in this one after one of the weirdest and wildest games that I think I've seen in Grandmasters in quite a while. You know, we've seen some pretty powerful outcomes on like Mana Cyclones, like some pretty cool Conjurers calling stuff, like when Tice had the Spirit of the Frog pop off.
Oh yeah.
That was really cool. But Casie in that one, finding timeout after Jarla somehow manages to scrap himself into the game in a situation that looked unrecoverable. That was just unbelievable. And so now, as we move into game number 2, Casie has moved over to the secondary deck that he has brought, and Jarla on the tertiary deck. So we can take a look at Casie's and see what it is. You bring an initial deck, and then you have 2 different decks that are up to 5 cards different. And when I say different, they're of the same class. So Casie moving over, and you can see what's added in.
Yeah, Fairy Dragons, first and foremost. So frustrating for mages to have to deal with early on. Shuts down any of that kind of tempo Sorcerer's Apprentice nonsense, but most importantly, just hits them in the face for a lot of damage and can't be pinged off over 2 turns. When I've been kind of on my soapbox this broadcast so far about how potentially players overtech their secondary and tertiary, the Rogue versus Mage secondary is something that I was looking at specifically because I've seen multiple games during Grandmasters where Rogues have just got stuck with Betrayals and Walk the Plank specifically in their hand that have just cost them development. So I wonder whether, you know, more things just like tempo minions going in there would be a better way to go than kind of planning for the eventuality that you have to deal with your opponent's stuff.
I'll follow up on that in a second as we take a look at Jarla's deck list and see what he's added in. It's the anti-aggro package where a copy of Frostbolt, 2 half-time Scavengers, and 1 Rabble Bouncer get put in its place.
Yeah, and comparing this to Boar's tertiary deck earlier, where he just brought in the Scavengers and didn't really see fit to bring in anything else, I agree with him in part in that I actually don't really like Rabble Bouncer as a card. I don't think it's particularly effective, even as an anti-aggro tool. So I like not going that far, but I do think that cards like Frostbolt and Doomsayer are definitely things that you can bring in to improve your anti-aggro matchups even further.
I'm going to touch on that point because I like Rabble Bouncer. The reason I like it is because it's finally a version of a card that is not a bootleg one, but rather an improved one. It's just an improved version of healing, in my opinion. It damages your opponent's board to make it vulnerable to pings. It's easy to get down on the board, and sometimes it is a very important tool. It can help you get Sea Giants in the right situations. I think Rabble Bouncer is really cool, but admittedly, I have been stuck with it in my hand a couple times.
That is my problem. Almost every time I draw a Rabble Bouncer, I wished it was any card but a Rabble Bouncer, apart from very specific situations where my opponent just has 7 minions on their board for some reason. And in Grandmasters, you are not going to have 7 minions on your board against a Rabble Bouncer deck. You are just better than that.
Sans game 1 of Casie versus Jarla, where sometimes you got to have 7 minions down. Nature of the Spirit of the Shark.
I mean, he still could have played in a different way to lead up to that point.
Sure.
You can plan those things out 2 or 3 turns in advance to stop that situation from coming up. I was talking about specifically he had opportunity to suicide minions on the turn before that he didn't. If there were Rabble Bouncers in opponent's deck, he might have that happen.
I want to touch on the Walk the Planks and the Betrayal as well, where you'd mentioned tempo minions. Kind of, again, looking at game number 1, where Casie just had a lot of stuff in hand at the end. He just had so many minions.
Yes.
I feel like the Walk the Plank and the Betrayal are meant to service as game closers, where you have secured the position, you're the one who's favored, your opponent has to just build stuff onto the board and respond to it and hope it works. Sometimes that means playing a Mountain Giant, saying go, and threatening Conjurer's Calling the following turn. Sometimes it means you pop off and you have a big Conjurer's Calling turn and you land a lot of Grave Harbors. I think in any of those situations, stuff like Walk the Plank and Betrayal help you follow up on the tempo that is ideal for you in those situations. Because the tempo minions that you want in the deck, they're already there.
I will also add that I've talked about this with a bunch of very smart people who are actively involved in building specialist lineups. Obviously, I am not. I did help a couple of people out leading up to this because, you know, I was kind of bored for 6 weeks. I needed something to do. And
once 19 hours are up, you got 5 hours left that day.
Exactly. One of the points that was brought up to me is that there's actually a lot of fear equity in including those cards in your open deck list deck as well, where if you have Walk the Plank and Betrayal in your deck, that affects the way your opponent plays. Sometimes it causes them to misplay by choosing to play around a card that they shouldn't in the right position.
It's funny that you mentioned fear equity because I actually have a story that partially ties into Hearthstone with this concept. Fear equity is when your opponent plays worse because they know of the possibility of something.
Yes.
That is a very relevant thing in Grandmasters because the deck lists are open. you know what your opponent can have, and so as a result, you often fear what your opponent can have. The first time I was ever introduced to this concept was via a poker book that a professional gamer named Elkie had written part in. And he was
Elkie's written a book?
It was specific poker. He's been a professional poker player for a number of years. He went from StarCraft to poker.
Right.
And he's played Hearthstone too. I mean, he has he was on Team Liquid for a while playing in the Hearthstone division as an influencer, and it was just really cool. Like, I've known him for a number of years. He's just an awesome, genuine person.
He is.
And when he describes fear equity in this poker strategy book, I was like, I don't really get what this is. And then as he starts to list examples and continue the literature, by the end of it, I went, wow, I very much understand what this is, and this is what I have felt from my opponents at every step of the way. And that applied to almost any strategy game I had ever played. And as time progressed and as I understood that concept more and more, I understood what my weaknesses as a player were more and more as well. And just that concept and understanding how it worked helped me play better at every step of the way in anything I've ever done.
That is a spicy vendetta draw for Casie. But yeah, just to put a button on that point.
The piloted, that's a downside to him right now. Because that pulls one of the minions out.
Oh, you're right. I was thinking it was weaponized Pinata. No, that is horrible.
Oh my gosh. That lowers the hand for Mountain Giant, and it took away a Cyclone.
Yep, that is a huge deal.
Everything up to this point has been very standard.
Yikes.
Yeah, and then suddenly that happened.
That sucked. There's really not much analysis to add to that. That sucked.
Wow. And you're staring down a waggle pick with an evil miscreant on board.
Yes.
This is not good news.
An evil miscreant that you are currently unable to kill. Nah, Conjure is cool, technically. Well, I said currently. He didn't have any mana at that time.
We'll also add the subjectiveness to it of unless you're playing in the heist right now, you just typically don't Conjure calling your opponent's minions.
Yes. But when you are as pedantic a person as I am, Admirable, you have to be extra careful that your statements are not open to pedantry from other people.
You're one of the only people I've ever met that could use some form of pedantic in two different forms in the same sentence. I take that back. I think a lot of people could do that. You're one of the only people who would do that.
I'm one of the only people where it sounds good.
Am I also being pedantic in explaining your pedantry there?
See, that just didn't sound good.
Well, nothing I say sounds good.
Point made.
I have to take that back as well. A lot of things I say sound good. They just don't sound smart. The stuff you say doesn't sound good, but it sounds smart.
What to do?
Backhanded compliment.
Wow.
Jarla's in the exact same position he was in last game.
Yeah, he's just
what
right
can I
back
do
there.
with this hand?
He's just right back there. Like, the Mana Cyclone that he lost just kind of solved his hand right now. He'd just be playing towards a Mana Cyclone at this point.
And now he just has to wait and go, Giant, Conjure's calling.
Yeah.
That's literally it. And so Casey's job is to pressure as much as possible. And if there's something that lets you pressure as much as possible, another waggle pick is pretty good looking on the follow-up.
Yeah, well, also you see him going digging this turn. He plays the Novice, he steps the Novice, and then he holds onto it just for maximum efficiency. But the important thing is in that process he draws 2 cards, because currently he doesn't have any of that Walk the Plank Betrayal stuff in his hand.
Why the dagger over the Fairy Dragon?
Just Sea Giant possibilities again, I guess.
So, I mean, the Sea Giant would cost 6, so Mirror Image to 5, Mirror Image to... I'm looking at the mana from Jarla's side. So Jarla would, if he spent 2 Mirror Images, would be at 5 mana, and there'd be 8 minions in play. Ah, that's exactly why. Because then he would play Sea Giant Conjure's Calling. Maybe that's not exactly why, but it's a reason why.
Oh!
Not good.
That happens 25% of the time.
Yep.
And you're real sad about it. 4, 8, 10, 14 from the pick, 15 from the goblin. Is that it? Is that all his damage? I think it is, right? Potentially get 16 from a direwolf from the faceless.
I hope you like
There's
my
no eviscerates in the deck.
Is he just going to clear in that case? I guess so, right?
That's a good question. I mean, does he need to clear with a sap? He just used a Siphon Soul, so you probably need to clear. But that's not a very good feeling.
It's not.
And for Jarla, if this minion gets cleared, I'm looking at you have a freeze on board into a Mountain Giant Khadgar Conjurer's Calling.
Yes.
So we're still in a situation where Casie needs to pay a lot of attention to board if he's going to clear stuff.
I think there's a justifiable line where you go face there and don't sap the second giant, so then you hope your opponent puts up a Conjurer's Calling as their only line of defense, and then you have the sap for one Grave Horror if one Grave Horror comes down into lethal.
Yeah.
But that is, of course, very weak to the Frost Nova being paired alongside the Conjurer's Calling.
Also, just the fear of Khadgar and the Conjurer's Calling
Yes,
as well.
of
Like,
course.
Jarla's just had so many cards in hand the whole game. Like,
Yeah. I wonder, like, obviously this doesn't, like, mathematically this doesn't really factor into it, but the fact that you killed the minion that pulled a 2-drop from your opponent's hand and didn't see Khadgar, like, whether that ever tricks your brain into thinking Khadgar's not there. Obviously, it has, like, statistically has no impact on it or not. All you got told was there is another 2-drop in your opponent's hand, which is the one you hit. But I just wonder whether that's one of the things that might, like, play mental tricks on you.
he gets to do it this turn because he drew Elemental Invocation! I keep forgetting that that acts like a coin.
Giant. Okay. Jarla looked like he was hitting the 25%er again. Important thing to note, by the way, that, like...
Betrayal off the top!
Is the most important thing to note.
Time it out. Just take your time thinking about it, because betraying the Mountain Giant, I think, is better
Yes,
than the Great
correct.
Armor. Okay.
Correct.
I wonder.
He can deal 7 damage to one taunt and 0 damage to the other taunt, or he can deal 8 damage to one taunt and 0 damage to the other taunt. And kill another Mountain Giant in the meantime.
Yep, that sounds like a Betrayal of the Mountain Giant. He's got to think about the rest of it. Like, can you sap first and do something weird? I don't really know. Has he kept track of how many spells have been played this game and know whether or not sapping one of these is
Oh,
dangerous?
jeez, he's 1 off lethal, actually, isn't he? With just Betrayal, Sap, Waggle Pick. He has 12.
Choose soon.
Why is this better?
I think it's specifically for spell count. Your opponent cannot play a Grave Horror from hand. Always? Well, I don't know.
But you still sap the other one. If you make this play, you still sap the other one.
Is he specifically attempting to reduce the board so that the Waggle Pick has better outcomes on stuff? Does he want to get rid of minions on his side to make Sea Giants tougher? I do fail to see how this is stronger than the other way.
It does look wrong to me, but I might be missing something.
The point is, without that betrayal, I don't know if he's in this game. And honestly, he probably still isn't in this game because of the second Conjurer's Calling that's available. He has to have the right draw, the right outcome from Blink Fox. What was in the opening hand? Does Hexlord Malakras provide anything of use? Oh, boy.
Dude, there's just always a Frostbolt in this Blink Fox. I've played this game before.
Finally, this Priest card gets its time to shine. In Mage. So again, the Hexlord Malakras question. For me, I don't think there was anything relevant in hand. Okay, I mean, look, we get to run it back. We get to run it back.
Oh, I didn't even see it. Casie, what was it? Okay.
Oh, I just saw that. I saw it was a legendary, and I saw it was Mage again, and I just really wanted it to be a third Hexlord Malakras. Jarla picking up this one. Even despite the outcome from the Piloted Reaper, it could have had huge implications if it hit the Khadgar in that situation. and it hit the mana cycle, and it still had implications on it. It delayed its mana.
Yeah.
But the invocation, I feel like on the turn he drew it, he was setting up the turn afterwards to be able to have the Frost Nova into the big Giants play. That invocation changed everything for him, though. I mean, that got the game started to snowball to that point.
It certainly did, yeah. And we can, I guess, go back and forth about which of the outcomes was better, him losing the Cyclone or losing the Khadgar. Of course, the Khadgar ended up being incredibly explosive, but there was a couple of turns where he just didn't really have anything to do that would have been reasonably good Cyclone turns if he'd have been able to go down that route. You have something bugging you right now, Nathan. I can see it in your eyes.
Rogue daggers always make me think about the game. And the turn that he daggered...
Don't go there! Don't go
instead
there!
of playing the Fairy Dragon.
Yes.
Would the Fairy Dragon have dealt more damage and gotten the job done? I don't know.
Good point.
That's starting to look at foregoing development for the sake of utility and
Yeah.
for the sake of, you know, potential disruption on your opponent's side.
So surface level analysis, he gets 2 damage out of the dagger. He would have potentially got 3 damage out of the Fairy Dragon, and he was 1 damage off lethal on the turn where he had Sap Betrayal Waggle Pick.
And he gets the 4th damage from the dagger the turn after. I don't know.
Yes, it's possible, but as with anything, we'd have to go back and look at it in detail. There's a game 3 coming up, and both players, I believe, have no reason to switch decks, and they are, in fact, remaining on those same decks we're going to see again. So the Walk the Plank and Betrayal package from Casie alongside those Fairy Dragons and the extra anti-aggro tools packed in there from Jarla.
Yeah. I always like to look at the dagger turns because Rogue, I think, is the one deck where you have so many justifications for doing different things, but sometimes when you do those different things, it's like massive implications on the rest of the game.
I agree.
And so I look at that Fairy Dragon and I want to point it out because I'm like, development equals good. You have a Waggle Pick in hand, like damage plus damage plus damage equals lethal. What do you get by playing around something? Like, is talking about one way or the other a pedantic situation? Like, are you being pedantic if you talk about either one of those sides of it? I think yes, but that's the point.
I think personally, like for me, dagger charges in Rogue are almost impossible to manage perfectly because they require just such deep dive analysis into all of the outcomes that are possible from your opponent as about to whether this 1 damage will be relevant going into a minion. What about random effects that can potentially influence that? Particularly like 7-8 taunts. Is he going to get 1 of them, 2 of them, 4 of them? In which case is it better for me to be able to dagger down a 7-8 taunt and push through? Like all of these things that it honestly becomes a feel thing. And you can tell that it becomes a feel thing because Rogue players are the most dedicated type of players in Hearthstone. Rogue specialists are the most dedicated specialists, if you want to tie it back into the format. And they've been playing with the idea of dagger management for 5 years to this point, and they still don't agree. You know, it's just impossible.
It's the C4, D4, E4 argument of chess, which I think Magnus has settled for us. It's D4.
Okay.
But I'm not Magnus, so I can't say which one of the whether or not the dagger or the Fairy Dragon's better.
Unleash the Beast becoming a possibility for Casie again, but it was alongside a Shrink Ray on this occasion.
That's a massive kicker.
It is.
As long as it keeps out enemies.
This card is strangely good.
It's real good. Yeah, particularly against Rogue, it's just so powerful because they play 3/3s and 4/3s all day. Like, that's just what they do, and suddenly 3/5 just kind of gets the job done.
Look at those two.
What is Hearthstone?
Well, it's a collectible card game.
Okay.
You can play it on your phone, PC, tablet, you know, a various number of ways. It's been out for a number of years, but basically you're going to collect some cards, you're going to build a deck, and then you find an opponent, and your goal is to eliminate their life total before they eliminate yours. If
I got really good at it, is there some kind of way I could play it at like a professional level and maybe get some money out of it?
Well, it's funny you ask, because right now we're in Grandmasters League, and so Grandmasters is a culmination of 5 years of Hearthstone excellence that's been pit against each other in an all-out battle over the course of 8 weeks, which takes place where they strive to have the best records and earn a spot at the World Championship.
And what's Twitch Prime?
Casie's spending a lot to respond to this, but honestly, I feel like the reason that this may not work is because he's had to use both of his burglars before the Spirit of the Sharks happened, so there's less value cards in the deck. Also, what he's taken out of the deck, 2 Evil Cable Rats and a Snip Snap have hit the bin to make way for the Betrayals, Fairy Dragons, and Walk the Plank. There's a little bit less Battlecry value and a little bit less combo value, and so for Casie, those are the massive pickups right now. I feel like he can fend off boards for days, but I'll tell you what, Mage does not typically run out if they get going and have time.
This is the exact kind of scenario that I was talking about, right? Like, he took a reactive card in Shrink Ray, he took another reactive card to pair with it in Whirlwind, and then he drew a reactive card and walked the plank. Like, does this hand win the game?
No, but if he had the minions in general, would he have won the game? And the answer to this situation was no, because of Jarla bringing in halftime Scavenger. So I guess that's one of my questions is, how can you take advantage of that play? Because that's becoming so common from Mage secondary or tertiary decks, is to play halftime Scavenger, kill your minion, and then make 2 4-drops.
So strong when that happens.
Hunter showed us that with the Hedge Clan sneak.
Yep. Yeah, he was just 1 mana off on the stealth guy. He nearly had it right.
I think for that particular metagame he had it right, simply because it was the Summoner Mage.
What was different about it?
Summoner Mage. Summoner Mage needed.
But in terms of like the minions that you interact with, why was a 3? Oh, because there was a bunch of zoo around and stuff back then. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
You were specifically targeting the weaker decks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Who cares about Rogan? Banning that one. I mean, jeez.
All right, well, a bunch of reactive stuff alongside Sharks and Miscreants suddenly starts to look a lot more promising for Casie.
The pickup. But the issue is that Jarla's, having one of those turns. And I'm seeing a Luna's Pocket Galaxy, I'm seeing a Mountain Giant, and a Conjurer's Calling. Like, you usually land on one play here. The Conjurer's Calling.
Most turns in Hearthstone, actually, you land on one play.
You know what I mean.
I do. But
what I meant
it's
is
still
that
fun to make fun of the way you
Oh,
talk.
jeez. What I mean by that is one of these plays is much better looking than the others. And
Also
the much better looking one is usually the one you go with. This is why Jarla... Oh, this is one of the reasons I love watching Jarla, though, is that almost none of the philosophies that I share in common with him outside of Control Warrior exist.
Yes. I genuinely believe Jarla to be the best pure control player in the world.
Oh, he's so good.
I genuinely believe that. Like, you have to win one game of control versus aggro for your life, and you get to pick the player that does it for you. I'm picking Jarla, every single time. Whether that extends to kind of mid-rangey decks or more combo-based decks that, I guess you could call Cyclone Mage, kind of remains to be seen. But when he's in his comfort zone, he gets to play what he wants. He's just freakishly good.
Oh. Stuff.
Cone of Cold.
See, that's the thing. Once you have all the reactive tools, stuff is what ends up adding up. And that's one of the reasons I like the reactive tools, is because, again, when you get them, you end up in situations where enough things will kill anything.
Yeah. Just rips it. Just going to leave his shark hanging around. Seems reasonable. Ziliax is the only clean answer at this point.
Ooh. Now that's an interesting draw as well.
Doomsayers often are.
How can you snag initiative back?
Just go like Ziliax Doomsayer this turn, potentially.
Do you want to wait to snag initiative back as well? Like,
I think any turn from now on you can take initiative is pretty great. Like, as long as you spend less than 3 cards this turn, you have Giant Conjurer's empty board next turn if you can get it done. That seems solid.
yeah, I think Jarla's priority has to be managing resources right now. I don't think he's at a phase of the game where he's able to identify what do I need to do to win. He needs to get to the spot where he can identify what he needs to do to win.
Yeah, this looks like the play to me. Like, maybe that ping goes minion instead of face. Very minor point.
I'm a ping face gamer.
I know you are. You're an everything face gamer.
Amen, brother.
He got the nuts!
Hey. For everything that happened leading up to that point, this has been a weird game of Hearthstone.
It's been a weird series of Hearthstone.
Ooh, Jarla sits up. He goes, okay, well. I feel like he expected that to be more difficult.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously Casie had options that turn if he wanted them. It's just he didn't really have anything he felt was worth defending, you know? Like, with Shrink Ray and so on as his random pickups to this point, like, he kind of feels like that board state was not worth holding on to, and he can let Jarla have a turn's worth of initiative and then deal with it later and move on.
I wonder.
Jarla feels, to me, unhappy to land on this Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling for some reason. I guess it's because of the random cards and it's the fear of Walk the Plank and such.
Time runs out on me.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easily imaginable that you just lose both minions.
It's also kind of because the rest of his hand is just a big fat stack of nothing right now. And like that was the echoed Conjurer's Calling. So now if this board does get dealt with, like what is Jarla doing for the next couple of turns? He's basically all in on Mana Cyclone at that point and just hoping that finds him some gas.
So many options.
Sapwalk, Miscreant, or Blade Master? I wonder about the Blade Master there. Is there a better turn for an Injured Blade Master than this turn?
Never, maybe? Oh, wow. Wow. The craziest thing about this to me is that Casie can still answer this back.
Yeah. He just hasn't got anywhere, right? Just hasn't progressed that hard through the game.
It's true, but at a certain point, Jarla just runs out of stuff. You know, like,
That's fair.
Jarla needs to find some extra cards pretty desperately
That is fair.
once this board gets taken care of.
Yeah. And I guess, like,
What to do?
just going back to the point I brought up at the start of the series, like, maybe instead of some of these reactive cards, you just play more aggressive cards. Like, okay, what are they? Like, Henge Clan Thugs, something like that at that point.
Yeah, like Thug.
So if Casie was had a Henge Clan Thug in his hand here instead of the Walk the Plank, like, his initiative still would have got shut down by that Doomsayer. Right? It wouldn't have really helped him out that much.
He would have fought back against it, but then ultimately ended up in the same spot.
Yeah. I don't know. This stuff. Building decks is hard.
Casie gonna go look for more answers.
Step. Always step.
Prep. Always prep. Step. Always step.
Doesn't replay it here, though, which I think does make some sense with lackey options he has in hand. Heist Baron Togwaggle on the following turn, potential to draw Edwin Van Cleef, all that good stuff. No reason to go too ham on it just yet. And next turn is massive for Casie. As far as he knows. And it still might be. It is not.
Oh, I wanted to see it happen. I don't know why that I wanted to see it happen. That just feels like that I'm just personally wanting something bad to happen to Jarla, but I just like spectacular things.
As long as it keeps out arrows.
Oh, the Conjurers. From the Cyclone, extra copy.
Blade Flurry?
Yeah. Seems like it.
Whoa. Okay. Forgive me. It's just in my head.
Why are you so allergic to just playing Togwaggle?
Well, it's just in my head. It was.
This is like the second time
Look,
today.
I saw 10 cards in his hand, and I got very worried.
Okay.
And just in my head, it parsed as, your hand's going to be full. Don't burn the treasure.
This guy's tough.
Okay. Well done for at least confessing to the class that that's what you were thinking.
Well, why wouldn't I? I always talk. Oh!
That's a bingo.
You usually just say bingo.
Bingo.
But you step. You always step.
Always step.
The Brotherhood shall prevail.
Yeah. Now, when it's not by itself, it is not a singular 3-mana 2/2 card. It's just a big, fat, dumb thing. But I think Jarla still has some game in this one.
Oh, he has plenty. Ray of Frost still hanging around to deal with that. Taunt minions in the way, shutting down the Waggle Pick and the Leroy. Conjurer's calling to just gas out and a Fireball to end the game. Like, that seems pretty solid to me.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, like, do you ever touch the minions in this spot with the Scavenger? I feel like he should probably be pushing face.
It's a good question. There is a lot of counting involved in answering that question.
Stand freeze.
So if we say a Conjurer's calling on a 4-drop gives him, on average, around 6 damage on board, which gives him 9 for the next turn, plus a Fireball is 15. The face attack is very valuable if that's the situation that you're in, and you can protect all your minions.
You know that your opponent has a Togwaggle in hand, so you want to kill the 1/1. Obviously, you want to kill the Edwin.
But actually, you're going to Conjurers twice, most likely, right? So I don't think this 3 damage going face ends up being relevant. No, Jarla disagrees. I trust it. He just had to think that turn. He didn't have to talk.
What are the odds you just get 2 of those? Like,
2 of those specifically, or 2 of the same minion?
just
That's different.
2 of the same minion.
1 in however many things there
Yeah,
are,
I
right?
just, in my head, I always want to know what that is.
Yeah.
Blade Flurry here, massive. That Blade Flurry take was the shutdown to what Jarla had in store. And so now, oh, that's not good. That doesn't do anything. You needed Archmage pretty specifically. He still has time to find that, though. Like, that's the crazy thing to me. He still has time.
94 minions, so 4 mana. There you go.
So 94 squared.
I wonder.
Is that right?
Sorry, I've lost interest. I was back to
You're back in a hero, watching Hero Power land?
Yes, I was.
Singular Hero Power pass.
Sorry, I literally just stopped listening to you.
Wouldn't be the first time. What more can he actually draw from the deck? Like, what actually matters right now? Well, okay, well, there you go. The answer is not very much.
That answers that question, yeah. Still has Life Drinkers in there, Sea Giants. Or a Life Drinker, sorry, I should say. 1 was removed in the secondary deck.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Betrayal was what you could have drawn. Because, uh-oh.
Can. This second outcome is huge. And it's another
Oh,
draw.
boy. And your board's getting frozen.
Yeah, not sure if I said this earlier or not, but it's worth noting while we're talking about probability that Khadgar being involved does not change the probability outcomes whatsoever.
Correct.
Because the second copies of the minions are just duplicates of the first. So the probability roll is exactly the same
What
as if
to
you didn't
do?
have Khadgar in
What
play,
to
you just get an
do?
additional copy.
25% here.
Yeah.
Jarla debating whether it's Frost Nova or Ray of Frost.
Time runs out on me. What to do? What to do?
I wonder if he's debating like a Fireball in the Togwaggle, maybe. To prevent any other weird
Huh.
shenanigans.
Yeah, maybe. I can see that.
You kill the lackeys, the same. Just about.
It's incredibly similar, yes. But it's incredibly, like, your opponent is maybe a few percentages more likely to be able to do something scummy with their Togwaggle, but you get to preserve 6 extra damage that can hit your opponent in the face for that opportunity cost, and I think that's worth it.
Why is Tog scummy, but everything else scammy?
It's so scummy is cards that are fair but extremely strong, whereas scam is unfair.
League of Evil.
Yes,
I got it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope you like my invention.
Well,
Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah,
seem
Dad.
particularly powerful.
I get it.
wow, Jarla. It just seems like every time his back is against the wall, there's something that can get him out of it. In that game, the Lunas Pocket Galaxy opened up the big draw of a giant to unlock his hand, which was just dead without a big minion. He had nothing to do without a big draw. And then that Mountain Giant costing 0 instead of costing 7 changed the game.
Is that how much it would have cost? Jeez.
He had 5 cards in hand going
Yeah,
into the
okay.
turn.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's the debate will rage on because when you see stuff like that happen, again, we've used the phrase opportunity cost. I feel like already too much this today, but the cost of spending 5 mana doing nothing, as Boston put it, and is quite an accurate assessment, quite honestly. But what that sets you up for down the line, like you will have people on the other end of that argument constantly, and I'm sure Jarla will be one of them coming up in a second.
Yeah, because that is pretty much going to be one of the first things I ask him about, because he is ready for an interview here. Jarla, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. What's up, guys?
What's up? Congratulations on your win. This is a big one as you move up to a 5 and
Thank
6
you.
record. Now, I want to cut straight to a hot topic. As Boston said earlier, that Luna's was a bad card. Luna's Pocket Galaxy. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if this card should be in the mage, but I kind of like it, and it has like the high roll potential. When you like coin it out on turn 5, or I mean 4, or if you just play it on turn 5, I think you just win most of the times. Yeah, I think it's pretty decent card, but it also has some downsides. When you draw it like in the late game, it's just that card basically.
So in your testing, which I presume you did a lot of against Casey's decks, what kind of win rate did you have with your mage against the version of the deck where he brought in the Walk the Planks and Betrayals and so on?
I think the first game, like in the main decks, mage is kind of favorite, like let's say 55. But when it goes to the sideboard, I think the rogue is slightly ahead because there are the annoying cards like Betrayal and Walk the Plank. So you cannot like just drop the giant and yeah, and you need to play around these cards. You need to like go giant and conscious calling because of Walk of the Plank, and yeah, it's a lot of the mind games.
And so now that you moved up to a 5 and 6 record, things didn't necessarily start the greatest, but you've been kind of tearing it up since then. What do you feel about your chances of making playoffs? You have 3 matches left to secure an 8-win score.
Yeah, I had a really hard time winning games lately. In Vegas, it didn't went well for me, and also I lost my last 4 matches in GM, so it was kind of rough. But I will try to win the next 3 series and try to make the playoffs.
No, nothing from me. I just want to say well played. It's a pleasure to watch you play, especially on slower decks. I really do enjoy watching you play. I feel like I learn a lot every time. So congratulations, well played.
Thank you.